have Broca, Fabian. Lovely.
Mm-hmm.
And she is the founder of River Dog Book Company. Tell us a little bit, maybe start with a little bit of your history in the industry.
So I first started in book selling 20 years ago. I was very lucky that right out of college, I got a job at a place called the Odyssey Bookshop in Western Massachusetts. And I had started working at the Eric Carle Museum of Picture Book Art when I was in school. And so I got an undergraduate degree in literature. I got a master's degree in children's literature. And my life was very clearly going to be devoted to books in one way or another. And so I have had the pleasure of working for 5 different independent bookstores. Started at the Odyssey, moved over to Annie Bloom's Books in Oregon. I worked at Briar Patch Books in Maine. I worked at Quail Ridge Books in North Carolina.
Wow,
and then I opened my own.
That's fantastic. That is a lot of experience.
Back up 1 second. You went from Massachusetts to Oregon?
I did go from Massachusetts to Oregon.
Wow, talk about spanning the country. And then back to the East Coast for the others. Wow.
Exactly.
Okay. I guess I'm curious. What drew you to Oregon?
A couple of things. I graduated with a master's degree from Simmons College in Boston, and there weren't a ton of jobs in publishing at the time. That they were really New York centric. I was really lucky to get a job at Beacon Press for about 18 months. I was there, and then I helped open the world's first Curious George store in Cambridge, which is no longer there. I should have mentioned it, but I was their first general manager.
Wow, that's so cool.
Yeah, but after a few years in Boston, I really felt like I was hitting my head against the wall of the book scene. It wasn't doing what I wanted to do for my life and my career. And Oregon had always seemed like the place that had a lot of what I loved to do. I loved to be outside. I loved to do literary things. I loved to be part of an artist sort of community and get that feeling. And it just felt like the pace there was a little slower than Boston. Yeah. So I moved to Oregon. I didn't know anyone. I met up with friends of, someone my father knew, and just kind of got connected that way. And I was there for 3 wonderful years. And I literally walked into Annie Bloom's and just said, "Hi, I used to be a bookseller. I'd love to be one again. Here's my resume." That was a time when you brought around resumes. Yeah. And they hired me.
Wow, talk about jumping without a chute. Good for you. That's pretty brave.
Thank you.
Pack her up and head west.
Yeah. A lot of my life has been like that. And so far, knock on wood, it's worked out.
I mean, you rarely go wrong when you're brave.
That is true. I agree.
And so what led you to deciding to open your own store?
Absolutely. So I skipped over the part where I moved to New Zealand, also not knowing anyone.
Nice.
Yes. So did that, met my wife, who was working in Australia. I was living in New Zealand. Through a series of events, we ended up in North Carolina, where she was finishing a PhD. And we knew that we weren't going to stay there long term. I had the pleasure to work at Quail Ridge Books during that time, but we knew what was coming, which was a move somewhere for both of us. 2 adult humans, 5 degrees, so much debt between the 2 of us trying to make life together. What does that look like? And so I said, well, it's now or never. I've always wanted to have my own store. And I knew what it took to do a store. So why don't I start one that's a pop-up? And I can do the things I want to do, have events, meet people out in the community. I can do online things before online was really a thing. Let me start that way. And then we can move wherever and I can take that business with me. Yeah. So started in North Carolina. We moved actually to Wisconsin first because Beaver Dam, Wisconsin, the mayor put out a call for a bookstore to come to town.
Oh, interesting.
Really?
This is, you can find it online. They were doing an economic revitalization plan. And I did go. I visited Beaver Dam. I was taken around town. I was shown some plans, and we made the move in October 2018. And I spent 18 months figuring out how not to invite a bookstore to come to your community. No offense, Beaver Dam, but I learned a lot about the dreams people have and then the reality of the finances behind those dreams. And so they are still working on their economic revitalization plan, believe it or not. But it wasn't working for us as a couple, and it wasn't working for the business. And so I did learn a lot. I had boutique locations in 3 different stores. I did pop-ups once a month. I still worked almost full time during that time. And I learned so much about what it was going to take financially and devotionally, time-wise, in a way that when you're not owning a store, you don't quite know all those ins and outs, even as much as you might think you do.
Yeah.
So then we moved to Oregon, where I thought, let me pair my bookstore dreams of a mobile bookstore, a pop-up bookstore. Portland has an incredible business community for, mobile. So it was the second time that I was going to live there. And we moved there in January of 2020. Remember what happened in March? And so, in another life, I worked in politics. And so I was a communications director of a homeless services bill that we were working to pass in Oregon while trying to get my bookstore off the ground.
Oh my.
Yeah. Pause for trucks.
Pause for trucks.
So then COVID happened. The city shut down. The Black Lives Matter protests were happening right outside my office, which was unfortunately firebombed, not because of the office, but because that's where the clashes were happening.
Yeah.
And it just seemed like Portland wasn't the place that this was all going to come together.
Yeah.
And then our landlord sold our house out from under us.
Oh my.
So, yep. By August of 2020, we were back in the truck, actually, with about 25 plants, 2 dogs, and 2 bikes, and headed back to Wisconsin, where my wife is from. We moved in with my in-laws for 18 months. That happened. And we then, after 18 months, purchased my wife's great-great-grandparents' home, which hadn't been in the family in 30 years. And the only way we could have done it is because my in-laws took us in during the pandemic. And we both worked an incredible amount.
Just save money.
Saved money, paid down debt, and got a deposit. And now we have our home. And so I now have River Dog Book Company that I still do on the side. I have a wonderful bookstore in town. It's in Oconomowoc, Books and Company. And I in no way want to step on their toes. We know each other well. But there's so much room to be doing other things in that area. It's a very literary place, Wisconsin. And so I'm still figuring out the best way to enter the community, especially as a store that's always been focused on diverse and representative literature, inclusive, all geographically diverse as well, because that's my background. I immigrated to this country. My family immigrated to this country. My family immigrated like the last 3 or 4 generations.
And you've lived in more places in this country than most Americans.
Yeah. So that was all really important to me. But I do live in the most conservative county in Wisconsin as an immigrant Jewish queer woman in a same-sex relationship. I'm what everyone's afraid of. And so how do you enter a community in Wisconsin that is really lovely, really caring and giving? Our neighbors are amazing. We've made wonderful community there. But then I'm going to be selling a whole lot of banned books. I'm going to be selling a whole lot of things that people might think ideologically that they're against until they get to know a little bit more about it and a little bit more about me. And so I want to make sure that we're safe in our community as well. So I haven't quite entered as fully into the community as I would have liked otherwise, because I'm still trying to figure those things out. But there's a robust world out there online, and so I do a lot of that.
Well, it sounds like you're approaching it in a smart way, right?
Trying to.
Sliding in, getting the lay of the land, and understanding it first.
Exactly.
And quick preview for listeners out there, we are actually interviewing Books and Company.
Wonderful!
In the next couple of episodes coming up.
Yeah.
Maybe
I'm
in a
so
couple of
happy
weeks
to
we'll be
hear that.
talking, I don't remember her name offhand, but we'll be
Lisa,
talking.
perhaps?
I think so. Yes. So stay tuned for that. So let's talk a little bit then about River Dog, or just maybe just the ins and outs.
Absolutely.
Of being a independent bookstore owner.
Yes.
Right? Whether it's pop-up or physical, a lot of the same things happen. Right?
Very
The
much
same
so.
events, the same challenges, the same wins. So
Yes.
talk us through some of the pros, the cons, what you love, and what just kind of makes you lay awake at night and go, "Urgh."
Taxes. I'm not going to lie. The business part of owning a business is the scariest thing. It's the most opaque thing. And it's not the profit piece. There's profit, there's loss. You want to buy less inventory and sell more to make money. That's a pretty basic equation. But okay, I have to pay quarterly taxes to the state. I have to pay, income taxes in certain ways. If you're a sole proprietor, the business part of it, that's the thing that keeps you up at night, for me anyway.
Yeah.
And I try really hard to be very conscientious about it. And then I inevitably miss a deadline that I didn't, know was there, and have to call somebody, and they're very nice and figure it out. And it's those types of things that add that additional level of stress to everything that you're doing. But the really fun parts, I think, are buying your inventory, telling people about the books that you love, setting up events that you're passionate about. It's the same for every business. It's either you're putting books out into the world that you know and love. So you're a niche business, or you're a business that focuses on a certain genre in some way, whether it's children's or romance or fantasy, whatever you want to do, queer books, you're either building that community yourself,
Right.
or you're entering into a community and letting the community tell you what they're looking for.
Yeah.
And that's one of the beauties of having a place like Books and Company. They're a general bookstore.
Right.
They're serving their community widely.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to serve also a wide community, perhaps a smaller population looking for some other types of representation.
Well,
Sure.
in the common parlance, Books and Company's got the 80%. Right?
Yes.
And you're working the 20%
Exactly.
on the edges that probably doesn't get addressed by your more commercial bookstores.
Absolutely. And not to say, I will say Books and Company is an incredibly welcoming place.
Yeah.
And that's difficult to do in our
Yeah.
county. So I give them a lot of credit for that. That's awesome.
Well, and you're talking about taxes and the challenge there. It's very analogous, I think, to an author who they write their book,
Yes.
and then they realize that there's the whole marketing piece,
Absolutely.
which is just as opaque. There's
Oh
not
my
just
gosh.
this one blueprint that you follow.
No.
Nobody tells you really how to do it. And it's a different skill set that a lot of authors either don't have or didn't realize they needed to develop.
Incredibly
And
so.
There's very much a tie-in with what you face there and
Yes.
what a lot of authors face. So very interesting.
Yes. And I will say that the cash flow piece of it is also a big learning curve.
Yeah.
Also for writers, I had a writer friend who got a 6-figure 3-book deal,
Nice.
which sounds amazing.
Yeah.
Until you realize over the course of 4 years, that's $25,000 a year.
Yeah.
That's not enough to live on. And she's supposed to be writing and promoting and everything else at the same time.
Yep.
And it's a little bit like that in book selling, that you think, okay, all of these great, amazing big books are coming out.
Yeah.
They're all coming out in the first 3 months of the year. No one wants to buy books the first 3 months of the year. Great. I've just spent a lot of money buying in new books that I'm very excited about, but I'm not going to be able to sell them until the second half of the year. How do you make your cash flow work? How are you making those decisions? Do you remember those books later? The organization that you have to have. We also don't talk about that a lot. How you organize your book selling life so that you remember in June what you looked at in January.
I can't even imagine.
Yeah.
Although my brain is picturing a spreadsheet right now. You know that, Ken.
Yes. Luella's already got a spreadsheet whipped up in her head. But yeah, that does have to be, it's got the leg.
Yes.
Like the leg of the
Yeah.
selling, the leg of the buying,
Yes.
and just tying those two things
And
together.
what are your
Exactly.
customers going to be in the mood for by then?
Right.
Because it might be completely different.
Exactly.
Because I'm sure
Crazy.
nobody told you, buy this book now, but you're going to sit on it for 8 months. And then you put it up for
Exactly.
sale, and that's when it's going to sell.
Well, and a
You
lot
have
of
to figure
people
it out.
don't understand that's the economics of book selling as well. And most of our invoicing, if we're lucky enough to have terms with publishers, is 30 days. Well, most books don't sell for 90 unless they're a new or best-selling title.
Right.
So if you've purchased 90% of the inventory that's on your shelf, because someone's going to come in and they say, well, I would like book 1 or book 3 of the 6-book series.
Yeah.
Those are books sitting there that you've already paid for. So the investment up front in a physical brick and mortar, or even to have, let's say, $10,000 worth of stock for a pop-up,
Mm-hmm.
that's $10,000 you've spent out,
Right.
and you're not necessarily getting it back.
Yeah.
Well, you only get to pay back one book at a time.
Exactly.
Which, that
Yeah.
can be difficult. All right, let's switch gears a little bit and talk about another side gig that you going on,
Yes,
a podcast that you launched.
I do. It's
Tell us
so
about
kind
it.
of you. Thank you. It's called The Business of Book Selling.
Ooh,
And it's-
brilliant.
Yeah,
Everything
right?
you just said.
We just got the shortened version right
Yeah.
here, folks.
100% true. Ooh, that'd be really like you.
Mm,
Yeah.
so sweet.
I like that. I'm really, really passionate about making sure that all of the bookstores that are opening, because they're doing their passion as well, that it's not just a side project that they lose money on. I want them to have an understanding of some of the ins and outs that we don't necessarily talk about as an industry. And right now, there is no one-stop shop for getting all that information. So you can go to the American Booksellers Association. You can belong to your regional, like the Midwest Independent Booksellers Association. There have been what I like to call a lot of men writing manifestos about book selling.
Yeah.
They're great. They're my friends. Their books are wonderful, but they're not practical how-to guides.
Right.
And there are a lot of ins and outs in an industry that's a little opaque to an outsider. And so even if you have a business background, or you have a marketing background, or you've been a librarian, or you just really love books, you don't necessarily know what Edelweiss is, which is an amazing platform that we use for book selling, for book buying and book selling. You don't necessarily know what indie commerce is, which is a type of online website that the customer can see to buy books. You don't know all of these ins and outs. You don't know what definitions of words are that are bandied around the industry. Where's your dictionary? So the whole idea is to have kind of a 101 series, and then we'll go from there. So there are 4 or 5 episodes out now. It is a side project, so I do it when I have some time. But I'm really trying to answer those 101 questions in one place.
That's such a great idea.
For the listeners, again, tell us the name of the podcast. So
The Business of Bookselling, and it's on Apple, Spotify, and on the Business of Bookselling website, bizofbookselling.com.
Is a book, B-I-Z?
B-I-Z, all for
Bookselling.com.
free.
All right. You're here, folks. Go check it out.
All right.
Thank
Thank
you
you
so
so
much
much
for
for
having me.
being with
Thanks for
us.
coming
It's
on.
great to interview you.
It was my pleasure.
All
Enjoy
right.
the rest of your day.
Thank you.